for those die-hard people that have stayed here and haven't wandered off to either capture their seat for tonight, or I see there's little circles, which is great, where they're telling stories over here towards where our porta-johns are and different things and that. But for those that are hardcore and still here, I want to see by raise of hand how many of you are treasure hunters or looking for mines. Not too many, just a couple of you. I'm going to tell you a story right now about a mine, and pretty close to where it's at. You ought to be able to gather up a couple of friends, and you should be able to find this in about, I'm estimating, 1 or 2 days. You should be able to find this mine that's worth millions of dollars. I've told people about it, quite a few people, and I've never run into anybody yet that's come back to me and said we went looking for it or anything, but you'll see why it shouldn't be too hard to find, and I'll give you the information why I know it's worth a lot of money. So I was working out in Vernal a lot of years ago. I was doing construction work, and they were out on Vernal Avenue heading up towards, for those of you that are familiar with that area, you take off out of Vernal on Vernal Avenue, and you continue on up, and it'll take you up past Steinecker Reservoir and on up to Flaming Gorge and so forth. And if you went off Main Street up there about 5 or 6 blocks heading towards the mountains, there's off on the right hand side there's quite a few really ugly, I don't know if you call them apartments or condos, but I was working on those. They're all, they were, I think they still are, all different colors. Some of these are all hooked together and they're all different colors, and I personally think they're real ugly, but they had quite a few of them, and they'd hired me to do the finish work on these condos. And so as I was doing finish work, the electrician was from, actually from, I think it was Mountain Home up here. It was real close there where he was from. And then the painter I knew quite well. Anyways, would have lunch and things and would sit around talking. I got a few pretty good stories. Well, one of them that I got was from the electrician that was from up in this area. And he was telling me the story that a niece, I think it was of theirs, was getting married. So he and his wife went out, got invited, and went out for the wedding ceremony in the Salt Lake Temple. And so they got out there, and they were there early, and they went in, and they were being introduced to the groom's family and those kind of things. And the groom's father, they struck up conversation. The groom's father was, they had a fancy name, some kind of like industrial engineer or some kind of title like that, which was kind of a glorified name for being a janitor in the Salt Lake Temple. Okay, and so they were talking, and he said, and they still had a long time before the wedding ceremony started, and he says, you want to go down? And he says, I'll show you the first electrical work that came into the Salt Lake Temple, and I'll show you the areas where there's tunnels and things from back in the mid-1800s, and a lot of things that nobody gets to see or know about in the Salt Lake Temple if you want to go see this stuff. And he says, yeah, that sounds great. So they're down looking at all this stuff, and the guy's telling him a story, and he says, you know, I was up White Rocks Canyon. We're going to tell another White Rock story. He says, I was up White Rocks Canyon on the White Rocks River there, and he was fly fishing. And he says, I was fly fishing along in the river, and he says, I threw my line back, and when I went to throw it forward, it didn't come forward, and I turned around and I'd snagged it in all the bushes and that along the stream. And he says, it had my very favorite fly. He says, I'd had it for a number of years. It was my favorite fly. I could really catch fish. It was my good luck fly and that. And he says, I was afraid if I kept tugging on it, it was going to break the line and I was going to lose my fly. And so he says, I didn't pull on it too hard, and finally I decided the only way I'm going to get to it or save it is I've got to go around and physically take it out of the bushes or whatever, so I won't lose this fly. So he's climbing around in the bushes and the rocks on the side of the stream and going to get his fly loose. And as he's climbing around in the bushes and trying to get up around to where the fly was and get it, there's a mine there. And he doesn't really know much about any of that stuff, but he took a sample. He took an ore sample there from the mouth of the mine, and he ended up taking it into an assay shop in Salt Lake. And the assay shops are frequented by mining companies all over the world. And so short time after he took it in, they wanted to keep it for a few days and run some tests and stuff. And all of a sudden, he gets contacted by a mining company out of Japan, and they said, we will give you $3 million to tell us where you found that rock. Okay, this is up White Rocks Canyon. At the time I was being told the story, and the story was back in the early 70s is when it would have been that I'm being told the story, and he says at that time when all this took place and when I'm being told the story, he says this guy says he stayed up nights, he couldn't go to sleep thinking about it. He didn't know if he should sell the information for $3 million. He didn't know how that would disrupt his life, if it would destroy his family life, all these different things. He went to his bishop and he asked the bishop what to do. He says, I need to know what to do, whether to sell this information, whatever. And the bishop said, that's not the type of thing I can tell you. You need to pray about it or whatever. You need to come up with your own decisions on what to do about this and then follow through with it. At the time I was told the story, he was still not sleeping well in that and still had not decided what to do. I'm under the assumption, because years later I'm pretty sure that he had never divulged where that was at. Now the reason I tell you this is a great story for those of you that are treasure hunter or want to become is because White Rock Stream doesn't go up that far where I think you could fly fish, where there would be fish. It's not that big of a stream, and so if he's fly fishing, number one, the canyon isn't all that long to start with, and as you go up very far, it turned into such a small stream, you couldn't fly fish, and there probably wouldn't be any fish up there. So you're talking about not a very long piece of stream. Next, you're talking about the guy's finding the mine shaft while he's looking for his fly stuck in the bushes while he's fly fishing. So you get two guys on either side of the stream, up 5 feet or whatever, and you hike up the canyon looking for a mine opening. When you find it, get some more samples out in that, and good chance that you can make millions of dollars right there with doing nothing but carrying a chunk of rock out of there and getting it assayed and turn around and sell it. But there's your good treasure and mining story that I heard years ago, where you might be able to benefit several $1 million with a day or two of legwork. So for those of you that stayed here and heard that, let me know, and if you get millions of dollars, maybe you could buy me a new car or truck or something and show your appreciation.